Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a seriously mind-bending concept. We're going to see how predicting the future isn't magic, and it definitely isn't fortune-telling. Instead, according to a really fascinating paper by Ryan McLean, figuring out where humanity is headed is actually a process of rigorous, methodical detective work based entirely on the preserved traces our ancestors left behind. We're literally going to reconstruct the future by looking at the clues history has already given us. Okay, let's dive into this. The 17th century scholar Athanasius Kircher actually hit the nail on the head when he wrote, "Nothing in all of nature is so hidden that it cannot someday be brought into the light." It's such a mysterious, beautiful thought, isn't it? This idea that the absolute deepest secrets of our reality are just kind of waiting for the right light to reveal them. So let's take a look at history's hidden clues and see exactly what kind of light they shine on our future.
So, here's our roadmap for the explainer today. We're going to start by decoding history's hidden traces, establish the rule of accessibility before probability, look at some ancient clues of restored order, pivot over to pop culture, and finally wrap it all up by reconstructing the final referent.
All right, let's jump right into Section 1, Decoding History's Hidden Traces.
To pull this off, we kind of need to completely flip how we look at the timeline of human history. There's this brilliant metaphor in the text called Angela's Explainer. Imagine history is just a giant, incredibly messy bedroom. Seriously, everyone who has ever lived just left their stuff everywhere in here. Some people left books, some left laws, some left ancient scriptures, and others left stories about robots or dragons. Now, most people look at this and just see a chaotic mess, but we're acting as detectives here. We're looking at this messy bedroom and realizing that if the exact same kinds of footprints and clues keep showing up, well, this mess is actually trying to tell us a story about what happens next.
Now, to actually read that story, we have to grasp the difference between just guessing and what the author calls constraint reconstruction. See, guessing, that's basically fortune-telling. It's just picking a preferred conclusion right out of thin air. But constraint reconstruction is an entirely different beast. It means we aren't just inventing a fun future, we are actively identifying what futures are still mathematically and logically possible based on the constraints of the clues that actually survived. We're narrowing down the playing field.
And what's really interesting about this framework is the sheer scale of it. We're looking at functional patterns across totally different domains. Think science, law, medicine, psychology, education, and religion. We aren't just looking at one field in a vacuum. We're hunting for an invariant sequence, a shared operational pattern that proves there's serious convergent data behind our narrative of the future.
Moving on to Section 2, Accessibility before Probability.
This right here is the absolute foundational rule of our historical detective work. You literally cannot guess what is likely to happen until you know what is actually reachable. Think of it like a game of chess. You can't predict what a legal move is going to be, or calculate your probability of winning until you actually understand how the pieces are allowed to move on the board. History works the exact same way. Every new technology, every new written language, every cultural shift, it changes the board. History constantly opens up new pathways, and we have to map those accessible pathways out before we can ever start talking about what's probable.
Which brings us to Section 3, Ancient Clues of Restored Order. When we start digging into religious history, our method means we have to strip away the local vocabulary, costumes, a process called semantic compression. Now, we're not flattening ancient languages or saying they're all completely identical, but just look at how terms like the Hebrew Dea, the Greek Aletheia, the Arabic Al-Haq, the Pali Dhamma, or the Sanskrit Dharma operate. I mean, they come from completely different worlds, yet functionally, operationally, they all point to the exact same thing: the removal of distortion, the exposure of falsehood, and the restoration of truth and right relation. They are quite literally doing the exact same work in the narrative.
So the crucial point here is this invariant sequence we keep finding. Across the world's major religious traditions, whether you're looking at Abrahamic eschatology, Hindu yugas, or Buddhist future Buddha traditions, we find these four simple cross-domain steps. First, you start with disorder or obscured truth. Second, clues or maybe a decisive figure emerge. Third, there's a huge crisis of recognition and judgment where truth gets separated from the lie. And fourth, a restored, renewed communal order is established.
All right, let's pivot to Section 4, Pop Culture and Accessibility.
We are taking a pretty dramatic turn here, because it turns out modern pop culture actually operates as an unexpected yet absolutely vital independent archive of these exact same clues. I mean, juxtaposing beautiful, historic stained glass windows from St. Cecilia's Church right next to modern sci-fi structural concepts really cements a core truth for us. Both ancient religion and modern technology represent a deep, shared human desire for what McLean calls accessibility collapse. They both dramatize that explosive moment when the hidden, the distant, or the divine finally bursts right into our immediate reality.
And this brilliantly illustrates just how incredibly fast our imagination is accelerating. We call this concept density. Think about it. Back in 1870, Jules Verne wrote a whole massive book just to explore the idea of a submarine. Then, by 1966, Star Trek makes spaceships totally normal and casually throws in teleporters and holodecks. By 1999, The Matrix is questioning the nature of reality itself. And by 2013, Rick and Morty is throwing multiverses, clones, and artificial intelligence into a single 5-minute joke. We are inheriting these massive conceptual building blocks, kind of like Legos, allowing us to process complex realities way faster than any generation before us.
So, what's the deal with all these sci-fi tropes? Well, they're all forms of accessibility collapse. They're functionally equivalent. A portal gun, a holodeck, or an AI, they might look totally different, but operationally, they do exactly what those ancient texts promised. They make the impossible, the distant, and the hidden immediately reachable. They just collapse the boundaries of space, language, and knowledge. They represent the fact that the frontier is no longer out there. It's arriving right here, right in our laps.
And finally, we arrive at Section 5, reconstructing the final referent.
It's time to bring these ancient sacred texts and our modern multiverses together into one concluding verdict. When we pile all these traces together, we realize the final referent, basically the ultimate endpoint humanity is hurtling toward, is not some frozen, static object or a single isolated moment in time. It is an unfolding temporal sequence. The surviving traces all point to a story that happens in stages. First, there's a promise, then a period of hiddenness, followed by a massive revelation, a moment of judgment, and finally, leading to a restored communal order where we directly dwell with the truth.
Now, you might be wondering, why does this actually matter for you right now? Well, because we live in an era where the cost of access has essentially dropped to zero. I mean, you literally have the entirety of human knowledge sitting on a little piece of glass in your pocket. The ultimate bottleneck in our civilization just isn't gathering information anymore. The hardest part, the real final crisis, is recognition. In a world full of total accessibility, simulated realities, and AI, our greatest challenge is simply having the discernment to recognize the truth when it's standing right in front of us.
So I really want to leave you with this one thought to chew on. If human history has been dropping this massive breadcrumb trail of clues for thousands of years across ancient scriptures and modern screens, and if the boundaries of distance, language, and reality itself are collapsing exactly like those traces predicted, what exactly are we about to recognize?